At my son's wedding, his bride slapped me and hurled her champagne glass into my face, snarling, "Sign over that damned mansion, you pathetic old fool, or I'll make sure David never speaks to you again." 200 members of Charleston's elite stood frozen in stunned silence. I calmly picked up my phone and dialed a number. 20 minutes later, 2 men walked through the door, and I watched her smug smile vanish as the web of lies she had so carefully woven shattered before everyone's eyes. Before we dive into how I discovered my daughter-in-law's shocking secret, tell me in the comments, what time and where are you watching this story? But let me take you back to where this nightmare began 3 months earlier, on a cold February evening. The front door slammed so hard my whiskey glass nearly slipped. David burst in, face flushed with excitement. "Dad, you won't believe what happened." I set down my bourbon. "Slow down, son. What's got you so worked up?" David pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, hands trembling. "I did it, Dad. I proposed." My stomach sank as he opened it, revealing a massive 2-carat diamond in platinum. I knew his junior associate's salary. This was months of his income. She said, "Yes, we're engaged." 3 months. He'd known Scarlett Hayes only 3 months now, talking marriage like it was a weekend trip. "That's wonderful news," I said, keeping my voice steady. My mind raced how she'd surveyed my home like a real estate assessor, asked pointed questions about my retirement portfolio, whispered on the phone during family dinners. "Look at this ring," he said, thrusting it toward me. 2 carats platinum, every penny of my savings, but she deserves the best. Every penny. He emptied his account for a woman he'd known 90 days. "It's beautiful. When did you propose?" "At Magnolia's on King Street tonight." Got down on one knee. She cried, "Dad." Tears of joy. Tears of financial relief, more likely. "David, can we sit? This is life-changing news." "I know, right?" He sank into his chair. "Scarlett Morrison has a nice ring, doesn't she?" My gut, honed by decades in courtrooms, screamed warnings. "You've known each other 3 months. Are you sure you know her well enough for marriage?" "What do you mean?" "Marriage is serious. Compatibility, shared values, long-term goals, children finances, where to live. We've discussed all that. We want the same things: family, happiness, a good life. And money." David's jaw tightened. "Why money?" "Because your fiancé appraised my house before asking about my health. Financial compatibility is crucial. You're a lawyer from an established family. She's a bartender. Different backgrounds, different expectations. So what, are you saying she's beneath me? You need to ensure you're on the same page." "We are. She loves me and I love her. That's what matters." I couldn't let it go. She seems presumptuous. "Have you noticed how she talks to me when she thinks you're not listening?" "Don't talk about her like that. She looks at everything here as if she's already moved in, calculating its worth." "Stop it." David's face flushed. "I can recognize a gold digger. I'm a grown man. Stop interfering in my life." "David, please." "No." He backed toward the door. "I'm done listening to your judgments. You're jealous I found someone who makes me happy. That's not true. Since Mom died, you've been alone and you can't stand me having what you lost." David froze, shocked by his own words. "David, wait." But he yanked the door open. "Scarlett and I are getting married whether you approve or not." The chandelier swayed as the door slammed. I stood frozen, listening to his car roar into the Charleston night. The mansion fell silent. I looked at my trembling hands. I stood staring at the front door long after David's taillights vanished into the Charleston night. The silence pressed around me, broken only by the grandfather clock, marking time for 4 generations of Morrison men. Pouring another bourbon, I sank into my leather chair. Perhaps I'd gone too far. David was 28, successful, educated. Did I have any right to question his choices? But Scarlett's calculating eyes haunted me. The way she surveyed my home like an appraiser, steering conversations toward my retirement plans and family. Trust her interest hidden behind practiced sweetness. I pulled out the photo album. Margaret's smile greeted me, her arm around David at graduation. 5 years gone, yet I still set 2 places at dinner. "What would you do, Margaret?" I whispered. She would have handled it differently, inviting Scarlett to tea, drawing her out with gentle questions, forming judgment without alienating our son. Turning the page, I saw my 25-year-old self beside Rebecca at our engagement party. I'd believed her smile was love, her interest in my family's practice sincere. That marriage lasted 18 months, just long enough for her to realize junior associates don't make partner overnight. Long enough to teach me marriage can be a business deal. Now David was on the same path. Scarlett had the same polished charm Rebecca wielded, But I'd glimpsed the cold calculation when she thought no one watched, when she examined my grandmother's desk or heard about our Kiowa beach house. Was grief making me paranoid? My instincts sharpened by 30 years on the bench told me otherwise. This wasn't jealousy. It was protection. David saw devotion. Scarlett saw dollar signs. I brewed tea, Margaret's old ritual, letting the familiar motions clear my head. By the time I drained the cup, I'd decided. Tomorrow I'd call David, apologize for turning his engagement into an argument. I'd invite them to dinner, offer a chance to observe Scarlett without confrontation. If I was wrong, I'd welcome her into the family. If I was right, I'd protect David from the greatest mistake of his life. At dawn, I rehearsed my apology. At 8, I picked up the phone. David, it's Dad. I was hoping we could talk. Silence stretched before his wary reply. I don't have time for another lecture. Son, I was out of line last night. You came with joyful news, and I turned it into a fight. I'm sorry. The silence shifted, less hostile, more surprised. I love you, David. Your happiness matters more than anything. If Scarlett makes you happy, I want to support that. In fact, would you both come for dinner Friday? I'd like to start fresh. I heard muffled voices. Then David's cautious reply. She says yes. Friday at 6. Perfect. I'll make the pot roast you always loved. He laughed for the first time in days. Haven't had that in months. Scarlett's excited to try it. After we hung up, relief washed over me. Phase 1 was complete. The bridge repaired, the dinner secured. Now came the real challenge, watching Scarlett closely enough to confirm my suspicions. Without letting her see, that's exactly what I was doing. Friday brought crisp February air as I prepared for the most important dinner of my life. Margaret's china gleamed beneath the chandelier. Fresh flowers brightened her vase. At 6 sharp, David's car arrived. He helped Scarlett from the passenger seat, her touch on his arm deliberate, like a rehearsed gesture. Dad, something smells amazing. David hugged me warmly. Just your favorite pot roast, I said. Scarlett's voice carried across the entryway. What a gorgeous mansion, so much history. David told me this has been in your family for generations. But her eyes weren't admiring, only assessing. Paintings, furniture, rugs, all measured with calculating precision. Over dinner, David announced, We've set the wedding date, April 26th, 10 weeks. So soon, I asked, startled. When you know, Scarlett said, flashing her ring. Why wait? She studied the china. Lennox Wright worth a fortune, I imagine. You have such beautiful things here. I served the meal. David devoured it happily. Scarlett picked daintily. Quite good, she said, though a bit dry. Restaurants are more consistent. Margaret's perfected recipe dismissed in a single breath. I forced a smile. Perhaps I overcooked it. Her laugh chimed. Then there'll be a next time, how sweet. Though honestly, doesn't it seem wasteful for one person to live in all this space? David and I think young families need homes like this while older folks are happier downsizing. Less upkeep, fewer stairs. David bristled. Scarlett, Dad loves this house. Of course. But practically wouldn't a senior community be better? Then this place could be filled with children and holiday gatherings again. The audacity stunned me. She was practically asking me to hand her my ancestral home. The house suits me perfectly, I said. Her smile held though her eyes flashed cold. Well, people's needs change with age. She drifted to family photographs. That's your late wife? Such a shame she won't see the wedding. Terrible timing. Silence fell. David dropped his fork. Scarlett, that's inappropriate, he said quietly. What I only mean, it's sad. If she'd held on longer, she'd have met me. Then surveying the dining room, she added, This house must feel like a mausoleum, all those memories lingering. She dismissed the vegetables as overcooked dessert store-bought coffee, weak, even the music funeral-like. Each remark landed like a small blade. By 8:30 I was drained, but then her mask cracked. In the living room her phone buzzed. She glanced and a genuine smile lit her face, warmer than anything she'd shown David. Just work, she murmured, typing quickly. It buzzed again, another radiant grin, then a third. Everything all right? David asked. Perfect. My manager confirming next week's schedule, but her sparkle betrayed her. The phone rang. She declined, quickly flushing. Sorry, just work coverage. But I'd seen the caller ID Richard. Not how one saves a manager. That night in my study, I stared at the ceiling. 30 years on the bench had sharpened my instincts. That was no work smile. That was the look of a woman in love, only not with my son. And she wanted my house too. After dinner, I suggested we move to the living room for coffee. The evening had been strained, but I was determined to give Scarlett another chance. We settled into the comfortable seating area where Margaret and I had spent countless evenings. David chose his usual spot on the sofa, while Scarlett perched on the wingback chair, ready to leave at any moment. I was pouring coffee when Scarlett's phone began buzzing relentlessly. She glanced at the screen, and I watched her face transform completely. Gone was the calculated politeness, replaced by something genuine and radiant that I'd never seen her direct toward David. Her fingers flew across the screen as she typed, and for those seconds, she looked like a different woman. Happy. Genuinely happy. "Everything all right?" I asked. "Oh, just work texting about tomorrow's shift," she replied, but her voice carried warmth and affection, not irritation from a work interruption. The phone buzzed again immediately. Another glance, another radiant smile, another quick response. Then a third time, her entire face lighting up with joy. "Busy night at the restaurant?" David asked, oblivious to the transformation. "You know how it is. Saturday nights are crazy. My manager wants to ensure we're fully staffed." But I'd spent 30 years reading people in courtrooms. That smile, that spark, that wasn't professional communication. That was a woman receiving messages from someone she cared about deeply. The phone rang, then cutting through the evening like an alarm. Scarlett's face went from radiant to panicked instantly. She fumbled for the device, and I caught a glimpse of the caller ID before she declined. Richard with a heart emoji. "Sorry about that," she said, cheeks flushed with fear. "Just someone from work about coverage issues. I'll deal with it later." Her hand shook as she placed the phone face down, glancing at it nervously. "Perhaps you should take it," I suggested mildly. "If it's work-related, it might be important." "No, it's fine," she said quickly. "Nothing that can't wait." David seemed satisfied, but I studied Scarlett's face more carefully. The genuine happiness while reading those messages was completely at odds with the woman who'd criticized my home and suggested I move to a senior facility. 20 minutes later, she excused herself to the powder room, grabbing her phone. Once the door closed, I could hear soft conversation through the thin walls. I moved closer to the hallway, pretending to adjust one of Margaret's paintings, and caught fragments of a very different Scarlett. A pause, then a soft laugh, holding more genuine affection than anything she'd shown my son all evening. My blood ran cold. She was talking about me, about my home, about David, with someone she clearly cared for more than my son. When she returned 5 minutes later, her mask was back in place, but I'd seen behind it now. The rest of the evening passed in polite conversation, but my mind raced. As I walked them to the door and watched David help her into the car, I was already planning my next move. 30 years on the bench had taught me that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. Scarlett Hayes had just shown me everything I needed to know. The investigation would begin Monday morning. Monday morning arrived with a sense of urgency. The image of Scarlett, her mocking smile at the wedding, lingered in my mind. I couldn't let my son fall into the trap of a woman so calculating. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to contact an old acquaintance, Jake Morrison, a well-regarded private investigator in Charleston. We had worked together on several high-profile cases, and I knew he could help me navigate this delicate situation. I dialed Jake's number, my heart racing. "Jake, I need to meet with you urgently. There's a serious issue involving my son and his fiancée." "Sure thing, William. Let's meet at that cafe we like," he replied. We arranged to meet that afternoon. When I arrived at the cafe, Jake was already seated with a steaming cup of coffee. "So what's going on?" Jake asked, his expression serious. "I have suspicions about Scarlett," I began. "Her behavior has raised alarms, and I've seen messages on her phone that suggest she's not who she claims to be." I recounted the tense dinner, the suspicious smiles, and the phone call from Richard. Jake listened intently, his brow furrowing with each revelation. "This sounds complicated," he said. "We need to dig deeper. I'll start an investigation right away." In the following days, Jake worked diligently gathering information on Scarlett. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake the worry that David remained blissfully unaware of what was happening. Each time I saw his smiling face, my anxiety grew. Jake made significant progress by the end of the week. "Scarlett isn't just a bartender," he said. "She has a rather shady past. There are signs that she's manipulated other men before." I felt a storm brewing. "We need concrete evidence before David finds out. He won't believe us unless we have proof." The wedding was just days away, and I knew I had little time to protect my son from what could be a disastrous marriage. By the second week of March, Jake had made significant progress in his investigation. Each day brought new revelations about Scarlett, and my anxiety about David's upcoming wedding only intensified. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was racing against time. On a Tuesday afternoon, I met Jake at his office to discuss his findings. The walls were lined with case files and photos, a testament to his years of experience. As I took a seat, I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. William Morrison, I've uncovered some troubling information. Jake began, his tone serious. Scarlett has a history of manipulating men for their money. She's not just a bartender. She's been involved in several relationships that raised red flags. I leaned forward, my heart racing. What do you mean? Jake pulled out a folder filled with photographs and documents. I did a background check and found that Scarlett, or rather Sarah Henderson, has been using different identities. She's had at least 3 significant relationships in the last 2 years, all with financially stable men. My stomach sank as he laid out the evidence. Pictures of Scarlett with various men, each one showcasing her charm and allure. There was Richard, a businessman, and Tyler, a bartender at a trendy bar. Both men appeared genuinely devoted to her, and it was evident from the photographs that she had manipulated their emotions. Each of these men believed they were exclusive with her, Jake continued, but she was playing them against each other, likely for financial gain. I felt a wave of anger wash over me. How could she do this? How could she treat people like that? People like Scarlett often see relationships as transactions, Jake replied. They thrive on attention, affection, and the benefits that come with it. She's also been known to ghost her partners, suddenly leaving them confused and heartbroken. As I sat there absorbing the information, my mind raced. How could I protect David from this woman? He was so deeply in love, completely unaware of the reality lurking beneath Scarlett's perfect exterior. Jake had already compiled a timeline of Scarlett's relationships, showing how she moved seamlessly from one man to another while maintaining an appearance of innocence. She had been spotted with Richard on Tuesdays and Thursdays, while Tyler took her out on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Mondays and Fridays were reserved for her independent life, so she could keep David in the dark. William Morrison, I suggest we gather more concrete evidence, Jake proposed. If we can get a hold of her phone records, or any messages that confirm these relationships, we can present it to David. That makes sense, I replied. But how do we do that without tipping her off? We'll need to be discreet, Jake said. I can set up surveillance, follow her to see who she meets, and document everything. This way we'll have the proof we need without raising any alarms. As we discussed the plan, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I had to save David from the impending disaster of marrying a woman who viewed love as a transaction. The days that followed were filled with tension. Jake worked tirelessly gathering evidence while I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy in my interactions with David. I saw how excited he was about the wedding, and each smile on his face felt like a knife twisting in my heart. Finally, one evening, Jake called me with urgent news. I have something important to show you. Meet me at Murphy's Tavern tomorrow night at 8. Curiosity and dread mixed as I agreed. The tavern was where Scarlett worked, and I knew this meeting would be pivotal. The next night I arrived at Murphy's Tavern, my heart pounding. The atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter and music, but I was there for a different reason. I spotted Jake seated at a corner table, his expression serious. What's going on? I asked as I joined him. Jake leaned in, pulling out a series of photographs. I caught her with Floyd tonight. They were all over each other, and I managed to snap these. The images showed Scarlett and Floyd, their chemistry undeniable. My heart sank further as Jake continued. She's been playing you and David like a fiddle. We need to confront her before this wedding goes any further. With the evidence in hand, I felt a mix of anger and resolve. I couldn't let my son marry a woman like this. The confrontation would have to happen soon, and it would have to be definitive. On April 23rd, just 3 days before David's wedding, I sat in my study staring at the evidence Jake had compiled. The photographs, the timeline, the documented lies. Everything pointed to one inescapable conclusion. Scarlett Hayes was systematically deceiving 3 men simultaneously, and my son was about to marry her. But I knew that simply presenting evidence to David wouldn't be enough. He was too deeply in love, too invested in his fantasy of the perfect bride. I needed something more dramatic, more undeniable. I needed Richard and Tyler to see the truth for themselves. Jake had provided me with their contact information and work addresses. Richard Blackwood owned a successful construction company downtown. Tyler Jackson tended bar at the Rooftop, an upscale establishment on King Street. Both men believed they were in exclusive relationships with the woman they knew as Scarlett. That morning I made my first approach. Richard's construction office was bustling with activity, but I managed to get a private meeting by introducing myself as a retired judge. with urgent legal concerns. Mr. Blackwood, I need to discuss something sensitive regarding a woman named Scarlett Hayes. I began watching his face carefully. His expression immediately brightened. Scarlett, she's wonderful. We've been together for 8 months now. Are you a friend of hers? My heart sank at his genuine affection. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Scarlett is engaged to marry my son this Saturday. The color drained from Richard's face. That's impossible. She would have told me. We're planning a future together. I showed him the wedding invitation, the engagement photos David had shared on social media. Richard stared at the images, his hands trembling slightly. There's more, I continued gently. She's also involved with another man named Tyler Jackson. I believe all 3 of you are being manipulated. Richard's shock turned to anger, then to a grim determination I recognized from my years on the bench. What do you want me to do? That evening I met Tyler at the rooftop after his shift ended. The conversation followed a similar pattern. Initial disbelief, then crushing realization, finally a burning need for justice. She told me she loved me, Tyler said, his voice hollow. Said we were going to move in together after she sorted out some family issues. The family issue is my son, I replied, and the wedding is in 3 days. By 10 o'clock that night, the 3 of us sat in a quiet corner, both unlikely allies united by our shared victimization. Richard, successful and confident, had been played for his money. Tyler, young and romantic, had been manipulated for his devotion, and David, my brilliant son, was being used for his family's social standing and wealth. She's been scheduling us like appointments, Richard said bitterly. Tuesdays and Thursdays with me, Wednesdays and Saturdays with Tyler, Sundays and Mondays with your son. Fridays she kept free, Tyler added. Said she needed time to herself. Now I know she was probably planning her next move. I pulled out my phone. Gentlemen, I have a proposal. The wedding reception is this Saturday at 5 p.m. I believe Scarlett will make her final play then. She's already hinted about wanting our family home. When she does, I'll call both of you. Your arrival will expose everything in front of 200 witnesses. Richard nodded grimly. She won't be able to explain away 3 men who all thought they were her only love. It'll destroy her completely, Tyler agreed. But what about your son? This will devastate him. I thought of David's trusting smile, his excitement about starting married life. Better devastated now than destroyed slowly over years of marriage to a sociopath. He deserves the truth even if it hurts. We exchanged phone numbers and made our plans. Richard would come from the north entrance, Tyler from the south. They would arrive separately, but within minutes of each other, creating maximum impact. Remember, I told them as we prepared to leave, act surprised when you see each other. Let the truth reveal itself naturally. Don't let her manipulate the situation. As I drove home through the quiet Charleston streets, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. In 3 days, I would either save my son from the biggest mistake of his life or destroy his happiness forever. But I knew I had no choice. The truth had to come out, no matter how painful. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for Scarlett to spring it herself. The wedding ceremony had concluded flawlessly under the April afternoon sun. David and Scarlett stood surrounded by congratulations from 200 Charleston elite, her white dress brilliant against the green backdrop of the historic garden. I sat in the father of the groom section watching the celebration unfold with a heavy heart. As guests moved from the ceremony area to the reception pavilion, their laughter echoed through the ancient oak trees. Scarlett accepted praise with growing confidence, her hand possessively gripping David's arm as if claiming territory she'd already won. "Such a beautiful bride," commented David's Aunt Eleanor. "You must be so happy to welcome her into the family." "Indeed," I replied, watching Scarlett's eyes catalog the expensive jewelry worn by our relatives, already calculating their worth. As the reception settled into its rhythm, Scarlett's behavior shifted noticeably. The demure facade she'd maintained during previous encounters dissolved into something more aggressive, more entitled. She moved through the crowd like a queen surveying her new kingdom. 20 minutes into the reception, she approached me directly. The crowd had thinned around the gift table, providing the privacy she needed for her real agenda. "Judge Morrison, we need to discuss something important," she said, her voice holding none of the sweetness she'd used during our dinner. "David and I have been talking about our future living arrangements." I set down my champagne glass, meeting her gaze steadily. "Oh, your house is perfect for newlyweds," she continued, stepping closer. And frankly, you don't need all that space anymore. We'd like you to sign it over to us. The audacity took my breath away, even though I'd expected something like this. I'm sorry, but that's my home. I won't be giving it up. Her face flushed with irritation. Won't be giving it up? Her voice rose slightly. You're old and alone, Judge Morrison. What do you possibly need all that space for? It's selfish to hoard resources when young families need them. My answer is no, Scarlett. She stepped even closer, her mask slipping completely. That house has been sitting there like a museum for years. David deserves his inheritance now, not after you're dead and buried. Sign the papers. I said no. Maybe this will change your mind. The slap exploded across my cheek like a gunshot, sharp and shocking. At the very same moment, Scarlett flung the champagne glass she had been holding, its contents splashing full across my face and soaking the front of my jacket. The sting of her hand burned against my skin while the cold liquid dripped down my collar. Gasps rippled through the reception as the sound of the blow and the spray of wine drew every eye toward us. David materialized beside us within seconds, his face flushed with confusion and embarrassment. What's happening here, Scarlett? Why did you hit my father? He's being completely unreasonable about the house situation. She snapped, apparently unaware that assaulting an elderly man at her own wedding reception might not reflect well on her character. I reached calmly into my jacket and withdrew my phone, maintaining steady eye contact with Scarlett, while Paul stared between us in bewilderment. I think it's time everyone learned the truth about who you really are, I said quietly, my thumb moving across the phone screen. What are you doing? Scarlett's voice carried the first note of genuine concern I'd ever heard from her. Making a couple of calls, I replied, sending the first prepared message to Richard. You'll see. The second message went to Tyler. Both texts identical in urgency, both designed to bring Scarlett's secret life crashing into her public one. They should be here in about 20 minutes, I said, pocketing the phone with a satisfied smile. David looked between us, completely lost. Dad, what's going on? Who's coming? But I simply smiled and waited. The trap had been set, and soon everyone would see Scarlett Hayes for exactly what she was. The sound of gravel crunching under tires announced the first arrival. A white pickup truck pulled into the park's small parking area, its driver clearly in a state of panic. Behind it, a silver Honda Civic appeared, disgorging its equally urgent passenger. Richard and Tyler had arrived, and my daughter-in-law's world was about to collapse. Richard jumped from his truck and rushed toward the pavilion, panic written across his face. Scarlett, I got your emergency message. Are you hurt? Why are you wearing a wedding dress? Tyler emerged from his Honda with equal urgency, his eyes scanning the crowd before landing on Scarlett in her bridal gown. What's going on? I thought you needed help. The reception fell silent. Every guest watched as two strange men interrupted the celebration, both obviously familiar with the bride. Scarlett stood frozen, her face cycling through shock, panic, and desperate calculation. Her confident mask crumbled completely. This isn't... You weren't supposed to... She stammered, composure shattered. David looked between them in bewilderment. How do these men know my wife? Richard and Tyler exchanged a meaningful glance, the look of two men who had planned this moment carefully. Tyler stepped forward first. Your wife... Tyler's voice carried perfectly orchestrated confusion. Scarlett, what is he talking about? We've been together for months. Wait a minute, Richard said, his tone building with calculated anger. Are you telling me she's been lying to both of us? I stepped forward, withdrawing my evidence folder. Gentlemen, I'm William Morrison, father of the groom. I can answer that question because I've spent the last month documenting this woman's lies to all three of you. 3 of us, Tyler asked, though we all knew he already understood. I opened the folder displaying photographs chronologically. March 20th. Scarlett with Richard outside Murphy's Tavern. The intimate embrace was crystal clear. March 27th. Scarlett with Tyler entering his apartment. Richard studied the photo with practiced shock, playing his part perfectly. April 3rd, Scarlett and Richard at Giuseppe's restaurant. April 8th, Scarlett and Tyler shopping for engagement rings. Engagement rings, David whispered. 27 days of surveillance. 47 photographs documenting systematic deception. She's been conducting 3 simultaneous relationships while telling each of you that you were the only one. Richard's voice rose with righteous fury. She told me I was the only man in her life. She said the same thing to me. Tyler added, his performance flawless. The revelation hit Scarlett like a physical blow. Her knees buckled and she collapsed unconscious, unable to process how her carefully separated worlds had collided so catastrophically. Wedding guests pressed closer, the celebration dissolving into chaos. David knelt beside the scattered photographs, studying each image as his reality crumbled. "These are real," he whispered. "All of this is real." "I'm sorry, son. I wanted to be wrong about her." Richard and Tyler maintained their act of mutual betrayal and shared victimization, though I could see the grim satisfaction in their eyes. Justice was finally being served. "I can't believe she played us all," Richard said, his voice carrying genuine anger beneath the performance. "A year of lies," Tyler replied bitterly. They looked down at Scarlett with disgust, then left without another word, their mission accomplished. David continued studying the photographs, his wedding dreams destroyed by undeniable evidence. When Scarlett regained consciousness, the reception area was nearly empty. Most guests had departed after witnessing the spectacular collapse. "David, where is everyone?" Her voice carried desperate hope. "They left," David said simply. "Everyone left." She struggled to her feet. "David, listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. I can explain everything." "Explain what exactly?" "How you were engaged to me while sleeping with 2 other men. How you lied to all 3 of us for months. Those relationships didn't mean anything. You're the one I chose to marry." David stepped backward. "Love you don't even understand what that word means?" She stared at him, finally, understanding her deception had completely collapsed. Without another word, she gathered her skirts and walked toward the parking area, heels clicking mechanically. When her car disappeared, David and I stood alone among abandoned decorations. White ribbons fluttered from empty chairs, the untouched cake a monument to shattered dreams. "Dad, I owe you an enormous apology." David's voice shook. "You were right about her from the beginning. I'm sorry it happened this way, son. I genuinely wanted to be wrong. Thank you for saving me from the biggest mistake of my life." That's what fathers do, protect their children even when it's painful. Together we walked away from the destroyed reception, father and son united by truth. David would recover from this betrayal. He was young, intelligent, and now wiser about the difference between genuine love and skilled manipulation. Someday he would find someone worthy of his devotion, and I would be there to welcome her properly into our family. As I reflect on this painful journey, I've learned that sometimes protecting the ones we love requires making the hardest decisions of our lives. Betrayal stories like ours remind us that trust once broken leaves, scars that never fully heal. But God gave us the wisdom to recognize deception even when it wears the mask of love. Grandpa's stories often carry the deepest truths about life, and mine is no different. I've seen how manipulation can destroy families, how lies can poison the purest intentions. David learned that real love doesn't demand your inheritance or calculate your worth in dollars. God blessed him with the strength to walk away from a toxic relationship before it consumed his future. The most difficult betrayal stories are the ones closest to home, but they teach us invaluable lessons. Grandpa's stories like mine show that experience isn't just about age. It's about recognizing patterns, trusting instincts, and having the courage to act when everything is at stake. God works through those who refuse to stay silent when evil masquerades as virtue. Today, David is happily married to a wonderful woman who loves him for who he is, not what he owns. Sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no to what seems right and fighting for what is true. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the importance of family wisdom, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories about love, family, and the courage to do what's right. Your support helps us bring these meaningful tales to families everywhere.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.